All right, welcome everybody to our Global TL Kickoff. We are so excited to take a moment on this September 18th to get us thinking about what global collaboration means, what global thinking is, and how we as teacher librarians around the world can foster this collaboration in our schools and between our schools. We have a fantastic panel tonight of people from around the country and the world to have a conversation, an informal conversation to frame what global collaboration might look like. We invite you, as you're listening in, to tweet your questions, tweet your ideas using the hashtag GlobalTL. We're going to get started with some introductions tonight. I'll start by saying I am Andy Clemens. I am the teacher librarian at David C. Barrow Elementary School in Athens, Georgia. All right, Joyce.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm hoping that we have an international audience tonight. I am Joyce Valenza, and currently I'm an assistant professor of teaching at Rutgers University and the director of the MLIS program there. And let's go to Nikki.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Robertson. I am with TL Newsnight, which is coming up this Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, so join us for our first show back. Also TL Chat, but I'm so excited to be here with some of my best PLN friends to kick off GlobalTL, so make sure to use that hashtag GlobalTL tonight to ask us questions and send out your thoughts. And I guess I'm going to pass it off to Nancy Jo.
Hi, I'm Nancy Jo Lambert, and I am on this Google Hangout in my car. So I am excited to be here. I am a moderator of TXL Chat, which is every Tuesday night. You can find us on Twitter at TXL Chat. I'm also a moderator of YA Love Chat, which you can find us on Sunday nights, YA Love, and then all the time, of course, for an ongoing conversation. And I am I'm a K-5 librarian at McSpadden Elementary in Frisco, Texas. And I'm going to pass it off to Jane.
Oh, hi, I'm Jane Lofton. I'm the teacher librarian at Maricosta High School in Manhattan Beach in California. And I'm also just finished my term as past president of California School Library Association. I'm very active in that. And I'm on the AASL Best Websites Committee. I'm delighted to be here tonight.
Pass it off to Annabelle. Jane.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Annabelle.
That's okay. I'm Annabelle Howard. I'm not a librarian. I'm not a teacher at the moment, although I have been. I've taught in England, France, and America. But for the moment, I am a co-founder of a non-profit called Big Fun Education. And I'm based in Connecticut in America. And we focus on literacy. We want to make literacy relevant, exciting, and sociable. So I guess have we all spoken? I think Linda Lindsay disappeared.
She did. She'll be right back, I'm pretty sure. Okay. We might need to send out another invite to her real fast.
All right, I will. And we'll pass it back to Joyce.
So, yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the notion of our library and its borders. And there's a number of things happening that I see this big convergence. And so the convergence involves a bunch of factors, and I think it also enables teacher librarians to really hit the start button. First of all, I was at a conference a little while back, and there was a teacher there who said she got her first job because what she said to the principal who was hiring her was, you know, if you hire me, you're not just hiring me, you're hiring all the smart people I know.
I love that.
Too. And I was thinking about how that's true of me and most of my friends. But now the smart people I know are not necessarily local. They're all over the world. And when I was at ALA, I was in Vegas, and I was at a hotel, and I watched in a sports bar as hundreds of people sat together watching the World Cup. hugging each other, sharing, and there were TVs or screens from all over the world, and it seemed that our world was far smaller, both online and actually really physically. And so there are things that are going on. We have a flattened global economy. We have a 24/7 news cycle. We see the power of online communities of practice. Young people are involved in citizen journalism. We have unprecedented migrations where borders are completely ignored. Henry Jenkins tells us about the importance of participatory culture, and participation is more possible than ever before. And we now have these really free and easy communication tools. So that is really part of the convergence. And Heidi Hayes Jacobs, in her book about global literacy, says, think about just putting the word geo in front of anything that you're talking about or teaching, and it makes sense. If you're talking about politics, it's geopolitics. If we're talking about sports, geosports, geogaming, geomedicine, geo-news, geo-learning, geo-development, geo-business, it all makes sense, and it seems strange to limit our students to a study of their local history or their local economics if we really can approach it in a geo kind of way. So I always wonder what if, and what I'm thinking about is not changing what we're teaching, but thinking about what we're teaching through a global lens. And when we're doing that, what does it look like, and how can we maybe leverage that to amplify the learning? If you start looking at our standards, at AASL standards, the word global is in there, whether it's explicit or implied, but you'll find it there. We know about the importance of connected learning. The New Horizon report for K-12 talked about implementing solutions for pressing both local and global problems, and the word global is all over that. We know that our kids need to go beyond just online learning to network learning, which is a completely different thing. And we're seeing a bunch of other things converging. We're seeing tools like Flipgrid, tools like Skype, and Skype now has this fabulous translator. We're seeing people getting involved in collaborative blogging or quad blogging. We're seeing people experience wikiness. We're seeing Twitter across the world, and we're seeing other social media platforms. And so it's very, very possible. And we're also seeing, I think, stages of this kind of global movement with an introduction to global collaboration happening on platforms like World Read Aloud Day and Dot Day and our mystery Skypes. But I'm thinking that that might only be chapter 1 of this book. And I'm thinking that chapter 2 might involve involving our kids in inquiry projects. Maybe we initiate inquiry projects with partners all over the world, and we're hoping that we can hit the start button on some of that tonight. We have global tools, we have mapping tools, we have image and video sharing tools, so that possibility for collaborative inquiry can happen. And what I'm hoping in the long run is that we move from chapter 2 to chapter 3, where our kids really initiate the projects, where we model it, and we have models for this. We have a young woman who started a blog that made the world waken to the notion that not all girls can have an education all over our world. And so the model of Malala just sticks in my mind. Can't all of our kids have maybe not the same power, but the knowledge to understand that they can reach out, that their friends are not just the friends that visit their homes or in their classrooms. And so my hope is that we move and celebrate chapter 1, move into chapter 2, which I think is collaborative inquiry, and then move beyond that to chapter 3, where our kids realize their agency to really be true global citizens. And so that's my context. I think we live in a flattened world, and I think it's teachers, librarians who can actually hit the start button here and model this kind of approach for our classroom teacher partners and for the other teacher librarians who might need a little bit of a push. So that's where I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Perfect.
That was perfect. Thank you, Joyce.
Welcome.
So what we thought we would do tonight is to spend a little bit of time talking about some ideas that we have about what global collaboration might look like. And I know for myself, I recently just had a project that I did with our 5th graders around September 11th. And it's a project that we've done for several years, but we've tried to add layers to it each year. And this year, like Joyce mentioned, I used a tool called Flipgrid ahead of the day and sent Flipgrid out to multiple people, asking them to share their September 11th memories from really around the country. And I had a whole class of University of Georgia students share, which, University of Georgia is right beside us, but that class was made up of students from multiple states and multiple countries, and they shared stories like flying into New York City from another country on the day of September 11th and being diverted to Canada and having to stay on the plane for 6 hours. And there were stories of parents who were in New York on business and wondering if their family members were okay. Other librarians shared stories with the kids about how they used to work in the World Trade Center and were there during the first bombing, and how they had friends and family who were still there on that day. And so it was this whole variety of perspectives that were brought to my kids about September 11th. And then they were able to take their own learning from the day, where we focused on heroes, how we respond to tragedy, and the events of September 11th, and they reflected on that same Flipgrid. But as I was working on that project with the kids and nearing the end of the day, I couldn't help but think about what a powerful global project this would be, to think about what do heroes look like all around the world. Does a hero look the same in the United States as it does in England, for example? I have a feeling there are a lot of connections, but people may have definitions of heroes that I haven't even thought of myself. I also thought about this idea of responding to tragedy, that there are tragedies all around our world, and it's not something that we want to dwell on, but it's certainly a part of our world and something that we as adults and kids have to wrestle with. And it's up to us to decide how we're going to respond to that tragedy. And there were so many positive ways to respond to September 11th around the world, so many messages of hope. That I'm certain there are other kinds of responses like that around the world that would be a very powerful global project that we could band together to do. So that's one idea that I have for a global project and what that might look like. Joyce, I know you have another project.
Yeah. There have been more than one author who have approached me, or has approached me, and wondered about the legs that their books have had. And so I was at a conference where Laurie Halls Anderson said, well, I know Speak is just hugely popular, but how do girls have or all kids have a conversation about the book? Where do they do that? How do we respond to Fever 1793? In not just in one history class, but all over the place. And not long ago, Paul Fleischman approached me and said to me, I have a book that's a call to action. And I do not want my book to end after children shut its pages. I want a call to action to really be a call to action. And I know that we can do more than just publish a book and put a promotional website out about it. And so he asked me to try to figure out what would happen if a book lived beyond its reading. And so what we're trying to do with Paul is create a proof of concept. So I want you to think about this as not one book, but what if librarians partnered with authors and began to figure out how to have these conversations. So Paul has this book that's coming out next week, and this is not just a promotion. It's called, and I think it looks backwards here, maybe it's straight for you guys, but it's called Eyes Wide Open, and it's kind of a book about citizen science. It is a book about citizen science, and it's gotten great reviews, and this is an advanced reading copy. But what it asks students to do is just be scientists. And so we wondered, what would happen if kids all over the world took pictures of the butterflies around them, or their shores, or the litter that was going on around their oceans? What if there was an inquiry project that really was global, and the kids had a platform for sharing their investigations? The kids went on video field trips and shared them. We developed inquiry questions that could engage kids in Australia, kids in Hawaii, kids in England, kids in Africa, and that we brought all this stuff together, and then we made sense of synthesizing the evidence that kids around the world would find. And so I don't really know what the right platform is, and I'm open to ideas, but we're starting out with the Google Plus community, and we're going to be inviting librarians to engage kids and teachers, and science teachers especially, in reading Paul's book. It got great reviews. It actually would function as an environmental text in the best sense of the word text. And we're just hoping that we'll get some partners. So I think the book comes out on September 23rd. I'll be doing a blog post. What I'd like everybody to do is grab my post and repost it and make it make sense for your community. And then it's not just because it's the wonderful award-winning writer Paul Fleischman, but let's just see what happens if a book began to live, and we engage kids in some activism around a book that is really a call to action. And so I'll be writing about that. Please grab my blog and share it, and please join the Google Plus community. We're thinking also that possibly an Instagram page, possibly a YouTube channel. We don't know. We don't want to build it too big before it starts. So Paul and I are looking, and Shannon Miller's involved in this too. We're all looking for partners, and we're all looking for people to play. So if you're on the Twitter chat right now, tweet using the hashtag GlobalTL and let me know if you're interested in getting involved in Eyes Wide Open and that project, and you can be a founding member of that. We're be happy to have you. And so that's what I'm thinking. And it's not just for Paul's book, but for books beyond. Think of a book that you think ought to be part of a global conversation. Thanks, Andy. Who are we moving on to next?
I just want to say I just love the sound of that. I really do. Yeah, sounds like it could really become quite a model for other people. I have a community called Reading Without Borders, and because we're saying we have no borders, we've really got to live up to it. So we're open to all sorts of things, book groups, occurring spontaneously, activities occurring spontaneously around books. And we have author events to kick that kind of thing off. So, we'd love to have Paul come and read a little bit of his book and talk about it. What age group is that geared towards?
It looks to me like it's going to be late, intermediate through middle, and possibly 9th grade.
Cool.
Can I jump in just for a second? Is that okay? I'm Michelle Colt. Sorry I'm late to the Hangout, everybody. And I'm a colleague of Linda Lindsay's. I'm in Hawaii. And Joyce, I love that idea because I think what it really does, too, is validates the children's responses as readers. And I think that, that reader response theory, that every child brings something different to the book, even if it is a nonfiction book and it's, analytical. They can, like you were saying, the butterflies in their community might be different than butterflies elsewhere, or the issues in their community different, and yet, like Andy, you were saying, there are commonalities between heroes in all places, and I think that's very powerful learning for students. I wonder, Joyce, and probably this is your plan with part of the discussion, is if we could talk to about how the elementary age kids could be involved, because we don't have access to Google+. So perhaps we could brainstorm like using Edmodo or another social network for those kids to communicate. And even you just shared with Annabelle that Eyes Wide Open is more for the upper middle school and high school. It'd be kind of fun for the elementary to pick a nonfiction text to work with too.
I would love that, Michelle, and I'm delighted to meet you finally. So yes, let's talk after, and let's get something started for elementary. I was worried about Google Plus for younger students, and so I'm looking. I'd be happy to work with you on a solution. Wonderful.
I as well would love to be on the ground floors. That's coming from elementary age. I think that would be great to find something that's not blocked, that's very accessible, and like you said, to find a great nonfiction text, or even a fiction text. I mean, or something that we can grab onto at that level and share with kids ages 5 all the way up through elementary. Because when we're talking about elementary, we're talking about a very wide age range of kids there. So I think to find an appeal to all of them would be a great way to do that.
I agree too. I see a lot of the elementary age kids get left out of the collaboration thing. It's more of the high school level kids, mainly because of blocks at schools are tighter with the little ones. But, people like Andy Plemons have found a way to bring the kids in and give them voice. And that's one of the things I love about what Andy does in his elementary library is he gives his kids voice. And it's so important to give them voice and let them know their voice actually counts and it matters and it's important and they matter. So I love that.
And that their voice should be heard. And should be heard. Absolutely.
And there she comes.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, why don't just for starts, join the Eyes Wide Open community, and what I'll do is connect you with Paul, and we'll brainstorm together.
And just back on that, you mentioned through 9th grade. I pitched it to the teachers at my school who are working on an interdisciplinary project and want to bring in service learning and, obviously inquiry. And I believe that it can go all the way through high school.
Oh, okay, great.
I mean, I think they're going to be okay with that.
Cool. Okay.
Right. So, Jane, do you want to go ahead and talk about your somewhat virtual book club?
Sure. For about 3 years ago, actually, Joyce did a blog post about wanting to launch a what we've started calling a somewhat virtual book club, so that we could get book clubs in school libraries across the country together on discussions. And I asked if I could join and was delighted to. And we've had a small community of about 5 or 6. One of the great things about it is that we don't always get great turnouts. Our kids are so involved in other things, and this means that we can still have a discussion even though we may not have a big group, at any given school. And we've had our ups and downs. Sometimes we've had trouble with connectivity. We've tried different platforms, and challenges matching our schedules. But we're really keen this year to take it further and to reach out to across the United States where we all are, but perhaps even find people further, and to bring in a large group. And we also decided that we would use Google Hangouts, even though there's some issues with that. There's always challenges with technology. We just had a meeting last night where we did it on Google Hangouts, and most of it worked, and we had a few little things we need to tweak. And we found the other thing that our big goal that we have this year is that it has been pretty much run by the librarians. Some of the kids have been active, but it's been the librarians coordinating it. And we're hoping this year each school is going to be responsible for can sign up to moderate a session. We're hoping this year that we can start to transfer the ownership onto the students and make them the leaders. So if anyone out there is interested, please get in touch with me. I can put in a link to the blog post that I wrote about it in the community. And please join us. And we'd like to make this a global community where the kids are the leaders.
I wanted to add to that, Jane, that you do have some interest in the middle of the Pacific here. I have Aria, who is a sophomore, and she is a dynamo. I approached her with the idea of us joining you in November when you were doing We Were Liars, that book. And she asked me if she could invite her old school to come on. So we're going to have more people just by knowing, going within our community and seeing what's of interest to them. So I think it's growing. We're going to help you make that grow for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of getting the word out about what's out there for people to be connected and how they can get connected. And like I mentioned to somebody this week about Dot Day, another school district, and they were like, "We've never heard of Dot Day," and I'm like, "How can you not have heard of Dot Day?" But people don't know, and so it's again something that may seem ordinary to us could be extraordinary to somebody else. So we need to make sure we open our mouths, we have that voice, and we start talking about these things and getting people involved.
I agree with that, Nikki. I think that a lot of times we say, "Oh, Twitter, Twitter, Twitter," reach out on Twitter and connect for a lot of people, and so for me, I think having a community like this global TL, where it's 400 and something members strong right now from librarians around the world, that this should be a community of people around the world who are willing to step up and make those connections. So I guess one of my hopes is that in this kind of community, when somebody shares a project, we all do our very best to support that person in their project and make some connections, even if it isn't a connection with us in the library, but to connect that school with some teachers or students that we know within our school. We don't have to be front and center in the project. I don't think we can be the connector.
I agree.
Andy, can I go ahead and jump in? Because I just want to say I had a friend who's watching and saying, "You're not driving while you're doing this." I'm not driving. I'm in a parking lot at my baseball game. So don't worry. I'm not driving. I have to go in a minute because my son's baseball practice is going to end. And after I drive home, I will connect again from there. But I just want to jump. Andy said right there, and what's happening on this conversation. All kinds of things happen within our buildings, with our teachers, students, with our different curriculum. Everybody has a curriculum and different things study and that they do. And I think that, like Andy said, the most important thing is that we find the people in our building that aren't, and if they're going to get connected, we be that link between them and the students in all the world that we connect them with. So no matter the curriculum or what the project is or what the idea is, whether it's a teacher idea or a student idea, I think for those of us that are connected, stand up and say, "I can help you with that. I can help you get your students connected. I can there on Twitter. I can put it out there on this Google community. I can put it out there in places where those of us that are connected. I don't think we should condemn anybody that's not connected. I think we should, grab their hand and say, "With me, let's figure out this work. Let me throw this out there to the people that I know and make this happen." Because those of us that are connected have those places and those spaces where we can connect those that and we don't want to or don't know how. And so I think we need to be voices in those links. Those students and people in our buildings that have ideas or that have those great projects that we can then say, put it out on this and get it connected.
I agree with what you're saying, Nancy Jo, because a lot of times the teachers don't know what to do or where to connect or how to connect or what to do, and so you being that link that connects them up. I've been able to connect two of my teachers with Donors Choose, and they've gotten what they wanted on Donors Choose by helping to spread the word. I got one of my teachers connected for Dot Day that didn't know how to do it, but I made those connections and then came into her classroom and co-taught with her for that. And so having that safety net, knowing that somebody who already knows how to make those connections is in there and is going to make those connections for them, then they'll feel more comfortable the next time to make those connections on their own. And so it's teaching the teachers a lot of times how to start those first steps of making those connections.
Absolutely,
I
Nikki.
just want to mention about Somewhat Virtual Book Club before we move on from that, is that there was so much collateral learning that has gone on over the couple of years that we did it. The most powerful thing was that one year Shannon Miller had a young man who was gay in her group. He was it was a very small group. Nobody was like him in their school, very small school in Iowa. In my school, that was right outside of Philadelphia, being gay was just like I was a sponsor of the Gay Straight Alliance, and what was real interesting was my kids embraced that kid. He became part of the group. There was nothing different about that young man, but he found his community in this place that was hundreds of miles away. And the kids in the book club kept connecting with him even when we weren't reading a book, and they worried about him. And I don't know how meaningful that was in his life. It was meaningful to us, and we to take care of him.
Well, Joyce, I'll tell you, having grown up pretty much in the Deep South in Alabama and Georgia my entire life, that was probably a life-saving connection for that young man, because I can't tell you, being in the rural Bible Belt South, and he was in Iowa. You know, Iowa's had gay marriage since 2009. That's where I got married this summer. But being in the South, you know, you don't open your mouth and say anything like that, and if you do, you should be horribly ashamed because you're going to hell. So that connection you provided probably saved that boy's life.
It was wonderful for our kids to feel that they were being a support system, that they were being a friend, and you know, the collateral learning that happened was huge. It wasn't part of the official curriculum of our book club, and it happened outside, and that's some of the most powerful learning that I think can happen. And it's also about what is being a human, what is being a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So. Anyway, who's next?
We're having such a great conversation. So many wonderful points brought up so far. I know we have some questions that we want to consider as we go along, but I know that we also have some other projects in the group that would like to be brought forward. So, do any of the others on the panel have a project in mind? I know Annabelle had mentioned something.
Sure, I have a couple of things that are going on through my non-profit, Big Fun Education. We're project-based. We do one thing at a time, and it's very kid-centered. The last big project that we did was called Macbeth Goes Social. I'm a writer as well as an educator, and I had a series of plays published, about 25 years ago, for children. They're all adaptations of classic plays, and I had a board game that went with them, blah, blah, blah. And now I've got grants to bring them into the digital world and make them interactive, and they're the perfect center for a global project. So my first grant was to take one from the page to pixels, and I did that, and I was fortunate that NBC came out to film it. And then the journalist who came actually volunteered to be in one of my plays, so I've got that one coming out soon, which is really fun. I have journalists from CBS, NBC, and ABC in the play. But the first play was a Spanish play, a classic Spanish play, and we went to a Title I school, and we worked it out with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. And while I was doing that, the play, although it was in Spanish, was set in Eastern Europe, and these kids had no concept even of coastal Connecticut, never mind Poland and Russia and beyond. So I created a mystery Hangout community on Google specifically to get these kids connected with somebody in Eastern Europe, and we happened to luck would have it that we connected with a fantastic school in Ukraine, and we set it up as a mystery Hangout. Kids, you know what kids are like. If you get to do something that doesn't feel like school, they're all for it. So we didn't give a big preamble to it. We just went for it. And then it dawned on them as they were going through the process that, oh, wow, you know what? These kids live in that place in the play. So it was a very concrete, memorable experience for them. and it was their very first experience of Google+. It was a bit of a hassle to break through the various barriers that had been sort of inadvertently set up, as it turned out. And the principal was so fabulous. She was just on the edge of tears through this. She couldn't believe it. These were Title I kids in the city in Connecticut that tests at the very bottom, and we had the biggest achievement gap in the country. So that you know, it really was a pretty severe kind of situation. And we had 8, 9, and 10-year-olds in there, just spontaneously going for Google Maps, speaking about it, just you know, off the cuff to the other kids. The adults really moved out of the center. It was great. The body language changed everything, and the kids took it upon themselves to use Google Translate. At the end, they were asking the kids, you know, what kind of music do you listen to? What do you do after school? All this kind of thing. And the principal said, right, hang on, we're just going to stop school now. We're going to have a press conference. All right, you lot, come on out, and put them on the stage. And we had a press conference where the kids said something remarkable just happened in this building, and we've all got to stop and pay attention. And they spoke about what a Google Hangout is and how they connected and how that connected with their work. So that was just one project that we did. And after I realized that it worked, I wanted to really take it social, because that was one event and it was memorable and it was lovely. But I wouldn't call it collaboration on a for literacy. So I concocted something a bit more elaborate, and we had a grant from a place in Texas, and I can show you, I think, pretty quickly what we did, because we used Google Tools, and we ended up with kids in 6 countries. Let's see if that's going to play for you. Can you see that? Can you see the YouTube yet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's sort of that. Oops, sorry about that. So that was that project. We plan to do that with other plays. The next thing we've done is created a community called Reading Without Borders, and we're trying to make reading very sociable, very student-centered, somewhat adventurous. Michelle was involved yesterday, in an event we had with a British author, which I thought was a lot of fun. Kids in Hawaii were just stunning, gorgeous, and out of that came a project, a follow-up project. I think the Argentinian kids wanted to know why the book hadn't been translated into Spanish, so they're taking it on themselves to do that. And we hope to have a follow-up hangout with the author where they read to him and he asks them questions. And the community is, we've got a Google sign up and spreadsheet, and we've got just over 300 people now. Teachers who want Google Plus people to read with their kids, either to the whole class or one-on-one in a mentoring sort of way, in a subject-specific sort of way. I've had teachers connect with me and say, I've got kids who are so interested in the digital world and in business, and I haven't got a clue. We don't have those kind of books at school. So I'm partnering them up with people who, run those kind of companies. We actually have a rocket scientist who's going to read about engineering with an eighth grader. So there's some one-to-one stuff going on, and in that format, we're recommending that the adult bring the first piece of reading, their 20-minute hangout, so each week for 4 weeks. The adult bring the first piece, that they remain open to a sort of an improvisational kind of conversation around the piece. And the next week, it's on the student to bring something that relates to the piece that the adult brought the first time. In that way, we hope to create little mini playlists of little reading collections that go in different directions. We've also got university professors who are interested in this because they're teaching teachers how to teach reading, and they need the student teachers need to get some experience of distance learning. So they're volunteering, and actually it's becoming a part of a couple of courses that the trainee teachers volunteer to read with kids. And then these hangouts, of course, are archived so that the classroom teacher can look at them. Sometimes when a kid reads with someone else, something new comes to the fore. You can see that child more objectively, or you make connections that you haven't got time for if you're in the moment with them. So I think it's a nice piece to have in a portfolio for a child. The child can go home, and when mum and dad say, what do you do today? They can say, oh, I'll show you. I'll show you on YouTube. So there's a lovely bridge, I think, between home and school with this project. And then furthermore, I'm thinking that perhaps in the schools of education it might be useful, because the professors can look and see, what did you make of these, these opportunities. So we're doing all sorts of things. We're having, the author events. The next event with Reading Without Borders is we're going to let kids see behind the scenes of making an audio book. I've written a play for kids called The Owl, the Pussycat, and the Poetic Detectives, and it's an 8-minute play for second and third graders. And the play is set in England, and I cast it on Google Plus, and now we've got exclusively British people in it with all sorts of regional accents, which I think will add interest. And the kids will see that even people who read well can take direction, and they have choices, and depending on your choices it comes out differently, and that reading can be a collaborative, fun, enjoyable, sociable project, and perhaps we'd model also by doing that other kids will go, oh, let's do that, we can do that, we've got a play, we can do that, let's do it in a hangout. So who knows what's going to come of it. We'll invite kids into the virtual green room afterwards to talk with the actors, and then we'll download the audio and make it part of our audio book. So that's the kind of thing we're doing.
So Annabelle, can librarians reach you and get involved in your projects?
Oh, please, please, please.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll put that out there.
Great.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, it was so very powerful to see all of the connections that were made and the tools that you used to do that. It was just amazing. So I'm looking at the time, and we have about 15 minutes left for our hangout, and so I thought we might spend the rest of our time having some conversation and hearing from some voices in the group we haven't heard from yet, as well as the people who have spoken already. Joyce, did you have a question in mind that would get us started off? I know that we want to talk about barriers at some point, but I'm sure there are other questions that we need to address as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's come up already, and I think that, this is a particular group that is not looking at yeah, but, and then, and I think one of the issues that has been raised already is what do we do with the little guys? How do we ensure that they have access? And we have people here who had some experience with the kids under 13 who may be dealing with COPPA compliancy. So anybody want to speak to that?
Actually,
Andy can.
oh,
But go ahead.
sorry, Nikki. I'll just go quick. I just wanted to say that it was a really powerful experience for our first graders to be a part of Annabelle's Hangout. And so because they logged in with the teacher's account, they could share in the Hangout. They could ask the author questions. And it was amazing to them, the illustrator, that they could ask him questions and get the answers right there. And the kids were still, Annabelle, I saw them today, they are just beaming and they're chattering on and on about all of their questions they asked and how he responded. So I did create a Flipgrid. Our technology was a little slow today, so I can't share it with you yet, but I will. And then, Joyce, to kind of go off from what you were saying, it was because, we only have the space of 10 in the Hangout, but Annabelle, I think I had another 10 teachers who would have liked to join you that day.
Wow.
What was so neat is that they watched it then, just via YouTube in the classroom, and the kids were so excited. I kind of ran through some different rooms, and they were just really thrilled. So, Joyce, I think one way is if we use the teacher's account, we can still connect kids. And back to actually what Jane was saying before, that we as librarians act as connectors or kind of stepping stones. My second grade, I have a second grade teacher who's an amazing artist, but she's very shy. So we had her show her artwork process for Dot Day, and then we just met in a Google Hangout among the second grade teachers just right here on campus. So it introduced our second graders and the teachers to what Hangout was and how we ask questions and how we behave. And I think that just that stepping stone, knowing it was in a safe environment between fellow teachers and friends, that's a good way to start. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Linda, you haven't said very much yet tonight.
I haven't. I am always looking for ways to connect. I like Michelle. I know Michelle likes to have student-centered kind of projects. That's where I am as well. I like to go into my community to see what's there and see how I can work with my students to build program. I was talking about Aria wanting to be part of Jane's virtual book club. So I feel I am a connector. I'm not very good at setting up programs. I'm good at following and telling kids about it and getting them excited about it. That's I think my connection is that way. So I'm always open. I'm always looking for the opportunities for people, and just looking to see how it would benefit our students so that they can participate fully and have lots of opportunities to do that.
And the thing is, we don't all have to have original ideas. We can get the wonderful ideas from all the people in our community. I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah. Oh, there's one other thing in the Reading Without Borders that I wanted to say, was that one border that we're also trying to break through is this age thing, whatever that is, the ageist approach to reading. We love older kids reading with younger kids, and we're pairing them up as reading buddies. And also, for those who are shy about working with a student, they're not in the world of students. They're just people on Google Plus, but they love reading nevertheless. And so we've got a little category in the community called Goodnight Stories. And so people all over the world have started to record a goodnight story from their culture. And we had somebody from Dubai, we had one in Spanish today that I didn't understand a word of, and we're also thinking somebody in Malaysia somewhere he's French and he wanted to do a section of Le Petit Prince, and then others have said, oh, I'll do the same section but in a different language, so maybe you could read that passage in 10 different languages, but just short, like 2-3 minute goodnight stories. So that's another thing that kids could show their parents, maybe if they have, an iPad or whatever, or some sort of device at home.
Wonderful. That's great.
And for me, there's so many amazing tools out there right now that I use with elementary age students, and I just love that they can unite their voices with kids and adults all around the world. So we've mentioned Flipgrid before. Flipgrid's one of my very favorite tools right now because you see, you hear all this collection of voices and 90-second little clips and responses to a topic. And Padlet, ThingLink, and Flipgrid are probably three of my favorite tools to crowdsource voices for projects. Even tomorrow we're doing Talk Like a Pirate Day, which I don't know that it has a lot of great action in the world as a part of it, but we're building these connections with classes around the world and joining the voices and having fun on Flipgrid and through our Skypes. But also, the whole suite of Google Apps is an amazing collaborative tool to be able to use. This week we were doing Google Hangouts and pulling up Google Drawing and talking to kids in another state while we were taking turns or drawing simultaneously on a drawing together. So there's such potential for kids to be able to talk to one another through, like Michelle was saying, that through teacher accounts, but through our accounts, we can connect these student voices and allow them to speak to one another, to know that their voice matters, and to create together. And then just one final thing, I let the kids hijack my Twitter account a lot. And so what we do is I've always got Twitter pulled up on my computer, and kids will say something that they wish they could say to an author or to whoever. And so we'll compose a tweet right there in the moment and send it, and it's just amazing that instant connection that kids get to an author that they would have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks for a letter to be mailed to an author and go through the publisher and probably never make its way back to them. But Twitter is so instant and quick, and so many authors are willing to take that 20 seconds to type a tweet back to students and just acknowledge what they've said. So I use Twitter all the time with kids. Of course, I'm the one controlling and typing it, but it's their voice.
And if I can throw in there real quickly, I know a lot of what we're talking about tonight, to a lot of teachers and educators that I know, it's so far over their head, connecting, oh my gosh. But what Andy said about just Google Drive and the Google Documents, the comment feature, I'm at a brand new school this year. They just went one-to-one. These kids are in rural Alabama. It's a K-12 school, less than 1,000 kids. We're surrounded by cornfields and cotton. And the big city and connecting with others is not even in their scope of things, or with the teachers there. We've got teachers whose family have taught in that same school for 100 years. Literally for 100 years. They don't move out of the community. So connecting those students is a big challenge, and just connecting the teachers. So what I've started with is showing them Google Classroom and Google Drive, and simply the comment feature, and how the teacher can see in real time what their kids are typing, even the little kids, what they're typing within Google Docs, and they're thrilled with the fact that the teacher can talk to them and they can talk back to the teacher. And what I tell them is, that's part of relationship building. And so as soon as I get them comfortable with that, then it's like, okay, so now that we can communicate with the teacher, the next thing we did is they're working in groups on Google presentations for a project-based learning project. So I was in a 5th grade classroom this week where the 4 kids in the group were all working on the same Google presentation simultaneously, and they knew, this kid was going to work on slide 1, this kid would work on slide 2, slide 3, so they wouldn't be typing all over each other, and learning how that works to collaborate within their own classroom. And so then the next step is, how can we collaborate with a classroom with kids that aren't in our classroom but maybe across the hall? And then from there, how can we connect with kids in a different school, in a different state, in a different country? And so I think for a lot of teachers, it needs to be the baby steps of, how can I simply comment to a kid and have them come comment back to me as a part of collaboration and working from there to build up to where we are. Because I think for some people watching this, it might be so far over anything they've even imagined being able to do.
But when I think about this historically, and I've been in this for a long time, when we tried teleconferencing, I don't know, maybe it was even 6 years ago, we had to unpack the clunky Polycon stuff. Collaboration involved sending documents back and forth over long periods of time. I think that, you know, my dream is for people to just get that it's really easy, and I think that's the message that you're sharing. And you know, as Andy was talking about his favorite tools, they're mine too. The stuff that has legs, the sticky stuff, I think is actually coming to the front, and we're identifying it. And I was struggling when Andy was talking, because like, what would I say if we did a lightning round and I had to come up with 3 different ones? I would say no. I mean, those really work for me. They're easy. There's no learning curve, and everybody I've shown them to thinks they're fabulous. So, you know, we may need to go through some final thoughts here. Maybe we should talk about what's your dream and what works for you as we close up. And my Twitter has frozen, so I can't. Speaking of easy and everything's frozen, I can't get questions. But if anybody's gotten questions, bring them up. Or if anybody has any final thoughts or dreams, why don't we share them? But quickly.
My dream, and this is my soapbox, and I'm going to be super fast, is for school districts to finally realize they don't have to block every blasted thing there is, because they are preventing teachers and students from being able to connect and collaborate, which is when the real learning takes place, when children realize there's an authentic audience for their work. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Yay, Nikki.
And my dream is really that the actual finding the connection, the barrier of that be lifted away, so that people can really focus on the work that kids are doing. I want us to figure out what is the best way to make these connections between librarians, between teachers, between students, so that we're not worrying about, you know, constantly asking on Twitter and our Google Plus communities over and over and over, please, can you help me? Can you connect with my class over and over and over? And instead, make the connection and spend all that time that you're searching for someone to actually, you know, have a conversation about what you're going to do. So I think that's something we need to think about as a group.
I think that's our that's definitely next steps, and we need to put something out on the community about that. Who else has a dream or a next step?
My dream is to have the students take over, and I watch while they make the connections.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm just full of dreams. How long have we got? I love the idea of having site-specific readings of plays or poems, and by that I mean that, for instance, that as I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. I've written a play around that, and I've connected with an elementary school in St. Ives in Cornwall, and we're going to get the kids to come out of the school building, which is on the road to St. Ives, and recite the poem with kids around the world, so that we'll have a site-specific reading of the work, and then a conversation. Things like that. There's so many. I mean, it's just infinite. We're only limited by our imagination.
Exactly.
I'd like to find, I've had good luck with helping some teachers who, you know, they like these ideas, but they feel they don't have the technology skills to do it themselves. Being the person who can do it for them, and getting more teachers willing to do that. And then also all the things everyone else said, but getting the kids to take over.
The kids
Michelle or Linda, last word.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's been wonderful. I love all these ideas. I feel like I'm in royalty here with Joyce, Michelle, Jane, Annabelle, Andy, and Nikki. Oh my goodness gracious. This is a panel of royalty. So Thank you so much for letting me participate. I enjoy doing Hangouts. I enjoy being with you all to get ideas from you.
Feeling is mutual. And Michelle?
I think that just like Linda said, it's really great that we come to this venue to get ideas from each other, and I hope that students would start to see the Hangouts and different tools that way also. That the information isn't just in books, but they can find it by connecting with passionate people who are knowledgeable.
Andy, you should have the last word. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Well, I can't thank all of you enough for taking time tonight to come together for this very important conversation. I think there is an energy in this group that I hope spills over into our community, and that we really push one another's thinking, that we step up and support one another as we're collaborating this year. So I just hope that that tonight is just the beginning of a very long conversation that we have over this school year and the ones to come. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and let's hold each other accountable and push one another this year.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
See you next time. See you Monday night for TL News Night.
You got it. Thanks.
Bye.